morning, everyone. I'm Liz Castman, Gallery Coordinator, and on behalf of Mott Community College Fine Arts Gallery and the Art and Design Department, I would like to welcome you to Art Talk, a series of conversations that feature professional artists, educators, and historians as they share their insights into their creative processes and research of their work. I would also like to thank the Ballinger Trust for making today's talk possible. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome artist Andrea Ondish, educator and artist who has an exhibition in the gallery, which is recent reliefs and paintings that's up now until March 8th. Good morning, Andrea. How are you?
Good. I'm fine. And good morning, too.
Good morning. So, first things first, let's tell everyone a little bit about you. You are a curator and education, the curator of education at the Marshall Fredericks Sculpture Museum, which is part of SVSU, correct?
Yep, we're on the campus of Saginaw Valley State University, and we're in the Arbery Fine Arts Building, which also houses the art department and the music department, as well as the museum. And we have a beautiful sculpture garden right next to the museum as well.
You know, I've never been out there. I really want to go check it out now that I kind of looked on the website and I was poking around and looking at all these beautiful sculptures. And I was going, I didn't even know that this was here. So.
Well, I'm going to mention one thing we just published, which is called the Public Art Passport. And if you go, I think it's publicartpassport.com, we add sculptures scanned like Google style, where you can do like a public art visit to all these sculptures from your computer. And we have our whole sculpture garden done that way. And we also have Delta colleges done as well. So that would be a fun thing to do if you want to stay home and visit public art.
That's awesome. And what a nice way to be inclusive and give everybody an opportunity, because whether or not you feel comfortable going out or if you're just a far distance, it's nice to have that art accessible to you still.
Yeah.
And you also are a teacher at SVSU as well?
Yeah, my full-time job is the museum, which, I work 40 hours a week. And then I adjunct as well for the art department. Usually I do a class in the fall and a class in the winter semester. Sometimes I do additional ones, depending. Like this semester, I am doing 2 classes.
What are your favorite ones to teach?
Well, the ones I usually teach are silkscreen in the fall. In the winter semester, I normally teach the BFA senior seminar and health and safety class, which is a 4-credit course. It's the one that sort of prepares the batch BFA students to, do their show. And then also when they graduate, they have themselves on paper, the resume, artist statement, all that stuff to apply for jobs or go on to further studies. So those are normally the 2 that I teach every year. And then this semester, I also taught in advanced printmaking as well.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So you are often surrounded by young budding artists as they start their path. Can you talk a little bit about your path as an artist and how you got to where you are now?
Well, I started many years ago. It was back in the late 70s. I graduated in high school in 1978. And then I did a 2-year college, which was great because it gave me a little, start. And I was also able to transfer some of the credits when I went on to do my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree a few years later. And not only that, it would never happen today, but I was able to do my Bachelor of Fine Arts BFA in 3 years.
Oh, wow.
As opposed to, the 4 to 5 or whatever years it takes now. And then after I graduated, I applied for an assistantship in Illinois at Eastern Illinois University, and I did get it. And I just moved to the Midwest. And that was in 1985. And I never went back. So I finished, it was only like a 1 year degree, it was 32 credits, it was only an MA. And then I said, I'm going to work a few years, pay off some of my student loans, and then I'm going to go back and do my MFA. And that's exactly what I did. And I did my Master of Fine Arts at Indiana State University in Terre Haute. And I was in Terre Haute about 12 years. And then right around 2001, I applied for a job. Actually, I worked at a Swope Art Museum there for a little bit too, and I waited tables too, just like anybody else.
Did what you had to do, right?
Yeah, do what do to make your living. And I also what I did do too was produce a lot of art. They were able to give me a studio still at Indiana State. And I was able to make art and then show, and I would go to Chicago, Illinois, Indiana, wherever I had to. I got a truck and I trucked that art all over the place and shows. And so I built up my show record, And then I applied for, I said, I'm going to look for a job at a museum, but at a university. And that's when this opportunity came available for the curator of education position at the Marshall and Frederick Sculpture Museum. So, and that was 21 years ago.
Wow. So as a young woman artist trying to forge a path and make her career, did you ever feel an instance or a situation where you felt your voice stifled or felt that you had to fight extra hard to be validated in your opinion?
It's interesting because years ago, I was dating somebody who was a sculptor, and he ended up getting a show, and it was in Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas. No, not Little Rock, Hot Springs. They had a big hearty, show, monthly show thing and all that stuff. And I remember going and, mentioning being an artist and everything. And it almost seemed like they were just more interested in male people to show. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I felt that. But, oftentimes, and at that time it was a different world, and, but sometimes I had, and then sometimes not, you know what I mean? Sometimes I was like, it depended. My work was kind of social political at that time, and it was powerful. And I had a situation happen. I had a show at the School of Psychology in Chicago once, and it was nice. It was in the old Dearborn train station. They turned it into like a little mall, and it had gallery and all that stuff. And it was interesting because one of the works I had spoke about abuse of women, and there was it was weird because I was standing behind this husband and wife. I didn't know who they were. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know. And I heard the wife and the husband talking. And when they were looking at my work, they were, discussing this. It was about, the abuse of women and the words that women use to protect the abuser, And the man was actually more sympathetic to the work than the woman. The woman got very, because she had never had that experience. She was in a very good relationship. So she disagreed with it. And it made me think, how could someone who may not have that experience, but not recognize it, that it does exist? You know what I mean? Just because she didn't have it. And I found that quite interesting. And so I thought to myself, my work isn't about you. It's about an awareness. It's about an awareness for those that do have these issues that they have to live with or deal with and that are uncomfortable,
Yeah, I always find it's interesting when a person is confronted with a reality that they didn't know existed and what their
Hmm.
reaction is. And for you to be able to witness that firsthand is very interesting. Because
Hmm.
oftentimes as the artist, unless we're there at the exhibition opening, walking around and everyone knows that they're there, I feel like that kind of honest reaction um, is something that we kind of strive for and
Hmm.
are able to use and take in our art.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have quite an extensive a span of art making, and you dabble in not only these kind of reliefs and sculptures, but a lot of painting, a lot of printmaking. Um,
Mhm.
do you find that over the years you kind of shift what you are most interested in, or is it an even balance of using all these things all the time in the studio, or how do you decide what series is going to be what, and where's the inspiration strike you? I know that's a big question, but
Mhm.
I'll I'll let you talk on that.
Well, you know, as you get older, you're going to find out that a lot of your time gets limited.
Mm,
And sometimes you only have, like, I used to be able to go and make art, and I know I have like a 6, 7 hour block of time to do that. And I don't anymore. I think at the most I could do like 45 minutes, maybe an hour. So I have these little short blocks of time. So I have to find art project things that I can do that are short blocks of time.
mm,
And that's where these paintings and reliefs come in, because they're something I develop over a long period of time. And because I'm using the cold wax medium, you have a drying time in between each application. And sometimes the drying time could be a week, or more, depending. And then it's a layering process. You're layering over, and so forth. So that could occur over a couple months, an hour here, an hour there, whatever it is. And then most of the time they're just sitting drying right now. I have a whole bunch sitting drying right now back. And so that works really great with me. And so that's the reason I want to do prints, but prints with me require a good long time. And there's the whole preparation before you start to print, and then the actual printing, and then the cleaning up and everything. That could be 3, 4 hours, and I'm kind of slow at it and kind of, meticulous and stuff. And but anyway, so I tend to not really make a lot of prints anymore, simply because I just don't have that huge block of time to dedicate to doing that,
sure.
except for mono prints. Like I was doing some over the Thanksgiving holiday, I did some silkscreen mono prints, which were fairly quick and easy to do. And those are okay. I could get by with those. So.
Sure, sure. You
Mhm.
started to touch a little bit. I wanted to talk about the your artist statement for this particular series, and you talk about the substrate layer of your work and how it's cast, and you mentioned hydrostone. Now
Mhm.
I know that we talked a little bit about it in the gallery, but I had never heard of this material. Can you talk a little bit more about your process and what
Mhm.
these are, and how they work for people who aren't familiar?
Mhm. Well, they kind of relate a little bit to like a sand casting. Instead of sand, though, what I do is I go down to Runyon's there in Clio, and I get low fire stoneware. And it's a nice soft clay. And you could take that, and I might use something like, these little silicone pans that people bake in, and they're just like red silicone, and they might be like square. They have lips on them, like the edges. Or I might create a surface, and then create a sort of low area with a rim of clay. And then I use industrial objects. Many of these things I found like just on the road or whatever when I'm bike riding, or or if I see something in a secondhand shop, it has a really nice industrial thing. I try to stay away from things like on occasion there might be a word like ward on it or something like that. But I try to stay away from anything. Like I don't want people to say, "Oh, that's a or that's a." Da, da, da. I just want them to look at the shapes and the forms. You know what I mean? In a sort of maybe non-representational way. I don't know. But anyway, and I press those into the soft clay and just have fun. Like, and it's all about intuition. Like you don't have any preconceived notion of what the design is going to be or anything. You're just pressing these shapes into the clay to make impressions. And I try to keep the imagery with very horizontal and vertical feel. It seems to hold together compositionally well. And then once I'm happy with it, I'll mix what's called hydrostone. It's a lot like plaster, except it's a little harder. What it is it's a gypsum, and it's in a powder form. You mix it with water, just like you would with plaster, and then you pour it into your matrix that you've made with the design elements. And then it sets, just like plaster. I leave it about a day or so. And then I pull it away from it. One thing, I put little hooks in the back, of course, for hanging and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I have this wonderful textural surface when I pull it out of the clay. And I wash them off. And when you ping the surface of the hydrostone, it has like a stone sound to it, like, and then I let them dry for a couple weeks. And because, when you first cast it, you touch it, it still has that damp feel to it. Mm-hmm. And I let it get a little harder. And then I start painting on it. And when I start, I usually will start with acrylic paint. And I'll just spot layer acrylic colors. Sometimes I don't know what the color choices are. It's like kind of intuitive about selecting it. And I'll just spot color it. And then at some point I switch over to oil paint and the cold wax and caustic media. And that's where I finish it off after a couple of layers of that. And then I take and I mix oil paint into the cold wax medium, usually like a dark color. I've been using Payne's Gray. I love Payne's Gray. And then I rub it in so that it gets in all the cracks and the grooves, and it looks like it's old and it's been, sitting for years, and all the dirt has got into the corners and the cracks. And then that's how I finish it off. And then I let that completely dry, which could also take another few weeks, depending on the humidity. And then I buff the surface. And I get a really beautiful, that wax buffed surface is shiny. It's really cool. So, and the cold wax medium is like, you can buy it in different sizes. Sometimes Michael's love the smaller containers. Gamblin is one of the brands that I use. You can use any brand, and then sometimes I bought like a big gallon, like a big paint can of it. So, because I go through a lot of it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that medium because I currently am teaching a painting class at St. Clair, and it's always fun for the students to experiment with new things to kind of transform the oils into something else.
Yeah.
And the transformative process is really neat.
Yeah. The cold wax medium is like, it's all used for you. You mix it with the oil paints only, not the acrylic paints, but you can create transparencies and glaze with it. That's what's cool about it. And but you're gonna always you are gonna, because it is wax, when you finish, if that's your last layer, you can buff that thing and it'll really, it has this just beautiful look to it.
Yeah, the luster of your works in the gallery is really, really cool. And the kind of layering and how you can see those colors underneath with the glaze is really awesome.
Yeah. I don't know. Something just came to me and I just knew how to do that. I don't know how I started, but I just did it. And I just enjoy doing
Maybe your ancestors worked with wax and caustic somewhere.
it.
It's just in there.
Yeah. Another thing I thought about is they kind of have what we call a holograph. You know what I mean? But in 3D,
Hmm.
there's this, kind of interesting thing. I don't know why, but it has that feel. And I was never really successful with holographs. I tried, love them, but that's what it kind of recalls to me, that sort of dimensional
Hmm.
feel of a holograph, but only in 3D.
Hmm. I'd like to talk a little bit about your subject matter when you're creating these, and you said that you look for industrial objects that you can
Mhm,
kind of form together to create a new form, a more non-objective
mhm.
form. Um, what draws you to the industrial object and machinery, and are you more drawn to kind of antiqued relics, or do you look for any inspiration on kind of new modern technology and machinery?
I don't know. I like, I guess I'm just trying to say, I don't know how I explain it, but within the industrial imagery, it's like kind of in my mind streamlined. It's just form, shape, flat planes, angles, circles, lines, just it just takes it down to those essence things. There's
Mhm.
no faces in it or people or animals or plants, nothing to that. For some reason, wanted to stay away from that. I wanted to just the essence of just form.
Mhm.
And industrial objects seem to lend itself well to that.
Mhm.
On occasion, you might, like I said, you might see a letter or, an alphabet or something like that, which was, on the industrial object or whatever. But I just liked those sort of, you know, forms and the shapes. And there's so many different kinds. I have like these little plastic drawers you buy for storage, just filled with all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And I'll just open them up and pull this, pull that. And it could be even something as simple as a placemat that has these wonderful concentric circles. And you'll see that on that one piece I have. That was just a plastic foam. No, it was foam. It was a foam placemat.
Mm.
Um, Anything like that would have maybe staying with the geometric kind of imagery, and that just seems to be real popular with me right now. I just like it. It's just sort of nondescript. It's just what it is.
Yeah, I like what you said about stripping these objects down to their kind of bare form, and how the non-objectivity, I feel it comes through a little bit easier when you aren't
Mhm.
kind of presented with these signifiers, signs and symbols that we constantly have this baggage that we carry with,
Yeah.
so removing yourself of that and concentrating on just a cog, there's something really interesting and beautiful about stripping away all of those things and just
Hmm.
the pure
Yeah.
essence.
And that's it. And I just said, and a lot of times too, I said, I'd be riding my bike and some piece of a car that was left on the road or whatever. I'll
Oh,
just pick it up and take it home or whatever it is. If it can make an interesting textural mark, it may find itself in my work.
giving new
So,
life to this kind of discarded object of the past.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so I noticed that within the release, you also have recent paintings in the gallery that you work with watercolor and
Mhm.
also oil on top of that. when you do these paintings as part of this exhibition series, were they in reaction to the reliefs or pre-sketches, or do they directly relate to each other? Or how do you find inspiration when you do these paintings?
Well, with those, it's interesting because I was really drawn to the very long rectangular format. You know what I mean? And I, in my mind, a number of years ago, we had a wonderful photographer in our museum, Bill Jackson. He's passed since, and he photographed. He was a photographer, and he loved to photograph. He'd go out and like for example, up here in the Saginaw Bay or other similar like areas, and he'd get the reeds. And he had these sort of landscape photographs, but they were abstracted in a sense where you had this sort of landscapey kind of thing, but it was like full landscapey, you know. And I liked that idea of taking this sort of a landscape concept, but not necessarily looking like a real landscape, you know, and changing it with different colors and the long rectangular format. And so I started to just kind of, he was an influence, I guess. I have a wonderful catalog still from him. And I liked that. And I've seen other artists kind of do that. They could do these real quick, you know, they're just, you know, they're not trying to render everything as it actually looks by any means. And that's my idea too. I don't want to render something as it looks because I have a camera. I could do that with a camera. What I wanted to do was have an essence, again, that essence of, and it's sort of so like a full landscape kind of imagery is what it is. And I'll start with, my new thing is I start with watercolor, and I'll take the watercolor on this sort of very long vertical sheet, and I make these drips happen, and these little drips will kind of come down, and that begins the process, you know. And then I will do maybe a little bit more watercolor, and I really don't do a full lot of watercolor on it. And then I start to develop other things, and then I'll move again to using, I might do little pastels, like oil pastels. And when I move to using also the cold wax medium and the oil paint, and again, it becomes this back and forth, layer, dry, and that may go on for 10 or more times, you know, over a period of months. And I have a couple in the back. I'd go grab one. I don't know if it would show really well, but and I just keep building up layers. So they're landscaping, but not true to what it actually looks like, in a sense. And they have these drip marks that I use in them, and then I also do the same thing when I finish. Like as I'm developing them, sometimes they'll crack a little bit, and then I rub the color into it to get into cracks and grooves. So you see these little fissures kind of things. And it almost becomes maybe like geographical looking, or I don't know, something like that. But
sure, kind of this topographic map of
like that. Surface gets kind of modeled or whatever, and then the final stage is when I know it's done is to buff the surface and create that nice shine with of course, the beeswax and everything. And and I'm always trying to find interesting color combinations. I had some really nice ones, you know, over the years. So and it's fun because a lot of my process when I'm painting those is based on memory loss. For example, I worked on those like, you know, 2 weeks ago. So I'll go out and pull them and go, where was I the last time? What was it? What was I doing the last? Oh, well, I'll just start out new again. So you start new every single time. That works great because you don't remember what you did the last time. And then you start fresh and you take it from that point to whatever, you put it away, and then you do the same thing again. You go back, where was I? Oh, okay.
The collaboration with yourself.
So what happens is it changes. So I find out that sometimes when you can't remember where you stopped on something, because you realize that every time you stop on an artwork and then you continue, you have to have memory of that. Well, sometimes you don't. So you start with wherever you're at, and then you go from that point back again. And so it in a sense, it's an intuitive thing, I guess. So, and that's how they develop over time. But it's fun because I would never, like when the finished product is, done, I would have never thought it would have looked like that. You know what I mean? So it's always a surprise at the end, whatever it is.
Hearing you talk about your process is really inspirational for me, and it makes me want to go try different things. When I was in graduate school, I did watercolor too, but I did multiple layers on top of the watercolor with acrylic glazes to build up a luminescence. But now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I gotta switch to oil. I gotta try this because I think it's gonna add a new layer of luminescence that will be exciting. So I'm gonna go get some new materials.
Yeah.
What about the names for your pieces? If you go in the gallery and you look at some of these works, they all have these beautiful names that you've assigned to them. Is that something that you draw inspiration from? Do you create them yourself? Where do the names come from?
Okay. Well, the reason I have the names they don't mean anything. They're just made up names. And it just makes me wonder, when you watch TV and you have you're seeing an ad for a new, heart medication or whatever. And you hear all these names and I'm like, where are they getting these names? And I thought, well, I can make names up too. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be nondescript. Again, I think I have a problem with people trying to pinpoint something maybe in my art. Oh, that's a this, or oh, that's a that, or that means a that. I just wanted it to be nondescript. So I made up names. I gave each one of them, and it's hard because I forget them, And but I just, make a name up. There are two, I think, or actually there's PSC, Crossroads 1, Crossroads and Crossroads 2. And those were named before I started making the names up. So that's the reason why they have those names. And but I just continue to do that. I just give them just a generic name, just like someone makes up a medication name for something. But I thought that's funny. And you see that all the time now. Everybody's making names up for new web, browsers and sites, and they make a name up, So.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, instead of just leaving them untitled, creating a name for them seems to give them a little bit more personality, I find.
A very unique one. They're the only ones with that name.
They are in themselves a thing. In your artist statement, you talk about the weathering of these materials and what we all go through, and how the kind of weathering that an object goes through is also a metaphor for the weathering that we go through in life. Can you talk a little bit about how you relate that and what you want the viewer to take away from this experience that they have with your work?
Okay. So each of the works have developed over a period of time, some for a long time, and they have a history, and as we have a history, we develop. Every day we learn something that shapes us, and we do that right through our whole entire lives. And we develop and grow, change, learn, and so forth. And they do as well as they're being developed. And so that's that layering. excuse me, and, what I feel within their work. So each of them, it's not something where I just went to, okay, you're done. And it's something where I shaped that artwork over a period of time. And if I had stopped early on, it wouldn't have the, I'll say, patina that it has on it, or that surface on it, because that's only something that can be done over a period of time and not within, a day. And a lot of people just produce art, they'll go, boom, boom, done. Here's one painting a day, we can do that. That's no problem. But in my case, I have to, and I don't know if it's why I do that, but it's like you feel you have to spend a long time to do an accomplishment. I don't know why. That maybe it was something when I was growing up or something. But it almost seems like you have to, put this effort in and give it this patina, which develops over a long period of time.
Sure. And it almost acts as a reminder that, some things take time. Some things are worth doing slowly, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a quote by someone. Anything worth doing is worth doing slowly, right?
Yeah. It's almost like, fermenting wine.
Sure.
You have to wait. It doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the cast iron work in your show and the process in casting iron, and what your thoughts are on that? And do you do that often, or is that kind of like I did it once and I'm good with that now?
Well, a couple of years ago, Frankenmuth, Steve Hargash, who's the director of the Arts Guild in Frankenmuth, I think it's called. But anyways, he kind of spearheads a lot of arts there. And he's the guy, like, if you're ever driving around Frankenmuth and you see these murals on the sides of buildings, he's the one who's painted them. He's a great artist. And anyway, he's always trying to, keep the arts going there. So what they did is they started to establish, it was a few years ago, it was before COVID, and they were going to have an iron pour, and they were hiring, there's these companies that, go all over the United States. You hire them, they come in, they do a big iron pour. It involves community, kids do projects, artists do projects, anybody does. They don't even have to be an artist. And it's fun. And then you get like a little cast iron piece. So I saw that and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Let's do it. So the first one they did, they gave you it was like a mold piece, but you scratched your design into it. And then they would make the thing and then they'd have big casting day and it was held, I think, in the on the main street. Something was by a hotel and the PNC Bank, I think. And it moved and it was different locations. Oh, no, it was actually at the park. It was the first one. The second one was over there on Main Street. Then the next year they said, let's build on it. We're going to do another casting. This time you sculpt your form using the oil-based clay, sort of like Marshall Fredericks did, using the plasticine oil-based clay. And they gave us the clay and everything. So I took it home and I grabbed my industrial items that I had, and I started making impressions and like little pieces of clay, and then layering these pieces on, always maybe about the size of that square form that the sculpture that's in there. It was just a board that I built these clay, texture form things on. And then what they did was they made a mold, and they make it, and I don't know the name of the material or whatever, but it's like a 2-part thing, and it was like a sand mixed with this stuff, which is kind of dangerous. You got to be careful and wear gloves and all that stuff. And then they pat it down on the sculpture that you've done. It gets hard, and then you pull it apart. You have this mold, right? And then they get it all ready with everybody else's that's, participated. And then they have the festival. It's called the Fire Arts Festival. And they do it every year. And just go to the Franken website, for the arts, and they'll do that. And they're going to be doing it again. And Steve kind of coordinates a lot of it. So anyway, they bought their own furnace. And so they're able to do the pours now themselves.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And they'll, and it becomes this big thing. And they have other events. They'll have, like this last year, they had it at the farmer's market in Frankenmuth in the back area there. And they had one guy doing blacksmithing. They had anything that involves fire to make art. They had raku going, and people doing where you could actually come do a raku piece and then be able to take it home with you. So it's about getting the community all to make art and everything. And so every year I've participated. So I made a few cast iron pieces, and that was one of them that's in the show. So I'll have to do it again.
Piece, yeah. And not everyone gets to be as lucky as me when I actually get to kind of touch these objects as we're installing, and it is heavy. It's heavy weight to it. I mean, you're surprised by it. You're like, oh my gosh.
And I actually had another one. I should have brought it too, but they are heavy. They're very, I mean, it's only like this big, but oh my goodness, because cast iron is really, really. So, but anyways, they do plan to do it again, and they invite anybody to participate. And and I just participate every year because it's fun, and I get a piece of artwork out of it. So.
Yeah, you touched a couple of times on talking about kind of community, and I noticed that on your website you talked about how you started a printmaking guild. How important do you think the sense of a community is to an artist, and how important is it to you? And do you often bounce ideas off your fellow artists that you meet and work with along the way?
I think the printmaking group you're mentioning is Imprint.
Yes.
And I when I lived in Indiana, I used to teach at the Indianapolis Arts Center. And we developed a group, and some of us taught there and some of us just took classes. And what we did was print exchanges. And we would all work on a specific print every year, and then we'd all have an exchange. So all of us would get one of the prints, and then we would have shows of them. And it was a lot of fun. We did that for about 10 years. And then the second part of your question is the importance of this in community. Well, and then again, working in the museum, we're starting to do a lot of outreach. We find that not everybody can make it to a museum or an art venue. And there are these communities that are, they don't have that opportunity. So we're reaching out, going into the communities, bringing art there. And so that's been pretty successful. And we hope to grow that. And I think that's important because there are so many communities that are underserved and need to have arts as a viable thing in life. It could be a career. And I think that there's also, to me, I think in more recent times, more of an awareness of the importance of the arts. It's not just a hobby. There are so many different things. We did a program with some Girl Scouts at the museum yesterday, and just watching these guys, the brownies and everything. And the work that these girls did was unbelievable. We were teaching them how to, it was a STEM program, so STEAM. And then I was showing them how to do sculptures with color theory, but based on the grid. And you ought to see what they came up with. I was just shocked. They were just amazing how creative they are, and they made some really nice artwork. So I was saying to the staff that was working with me, it's not just making the art. Look at them. They're taking their hands and their fingers and they're mixing the colors. That's dexterity.
Yeah.
That's teaching them these brain connections and dexterity and color, decision-making, putting this color here, putting that. There's a lot more that connects to art than just the making of an artwork.
Absolutely.
You know, there are skills that you're teaching your brain and so forth. So, you know, I think a lot of people are starting to realize the value of the arts, and what they actually do, and especially problem solving, decision making. That's all visual art.
Yeah, I have an almost 2-year-old who is pretty obsessed with markers and drawing, and to watch the development of his grasp and just the marks that he decides to make and the confidence and the color choices of him. I find that even I, as an adult artist, am inspired by his bold decision mark making, and it often, I feel like, is a circular thing, because it inspires me then again in my work as well. Do you find that that's the same with you?
Yes, it is. And also it's the connections, the in the brain of picking something up, holding it, moving it. I mean, there's all those, you know, the physical, you know, neurological things as well that are involved in it. And those are very important when children are very young, especially very young, to do all those things, you know, because if they do them later in life, it's harder, you know, to establish those connections in the brain at a young age is very important. And that's where visual arts is very good.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you had some words of wisdom for the young budding art student and artist starting off, what would they be?
Well, there could be a couple things. One would be explore any media, even if it doesn't resonate with you. Try it. You never know, maybe later in life, you know, it might. And then also to not give up. You know, artists, we all face that. You know, you'll never make a living. You'll never pay off your student loans. Well, I paid off my students' loans, especially with art degrees. So it can be done. And I would say, don't give up. And, you know, there are some people that will have a job and then still do their art on the side. Some people will do an art job totally and live that way. Whatever it is that works for you, like I said, don't give it up. Keep it there always. And take all and any advantage that you can, you know, or opportunity, take it. You know, because sometimes in later life, you might not have that opportunity to do that. So do it. And stay very informed. Or you've got the internet now. We didn't have that years ago. There's so much opportunities that you can take advantage of, connect with others, set up and have your own little exhibitions at small places, maybe little coffee shops or whatever, build up that show record. You know, and take it to the max. I mean, you know, you'll get to live life once. Have a great time doing it. So that's all I can say. Be persistent and don't give up.
Well, thank you so much, Andrea. I really appreciate you talking with us today. Andrea's exhibition, Reliefs and Recent Paintings, are on display now in the gallery until March 8th. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks. We get to see it.